Hey guys, welcome back. Come on in, make yourself at home as you should when you're a guest in Bradley's house. I am your co-host, Jarett Orr. She is the executive director of the Noel Family Foundation, and our host, Ms. Kellie Noel. Kellie, how you doing tonight?
I'm fantastic. How are you, Jarett?
Good. You know, one of these days I'm going to give you like the true introduction. I'm going to a 6-foot guard from the University of Southern California.
That would be a lie, but okay.
I know. It's like you're just under 6 foot, but I think with the right shoes on, that's...
honestly, I hit 5'8" at the age of 12, and now I'm 5'7.5" because getting old sucks.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I was like 5'5" when I got my first license at 16, and then I was 6 foot when I went back at 21, and the lady was like, "This has to be a mistake." And I'm like, "No, lady, I can't explain to you, but do you see the pimples on my face? Yeah, I'm going through puberty at 21 right now. I got this stuff growing under my arms, so don't
make it worse, woman."
Yeah, I'm already a little weird about this. So
awkward, as if the DMV couldn't get any worse.
Right. I got Esther behind the counter busting my balls about being short last time I came in. I know I was short, lady. Thank you.
Oh, Esther.
So, Kellie, once again, we have a really fun show lined up, and this is something that we've talked about wanting to do, and it kind of just came together here, and I'm super excited about doing it. Everybody knows that it's 2021, so it's the 25th year anniversary of that self-titled album, and we're going to get a chance to kind of dive into it and talk about it a little bit. I'm super excited about it. Kellie, who is our house guest returning to Bradley's house this week?
I'm super stoked to let everybody know that we have Jon Phillips again today. And the last time Jon was nice enough to join us, we talked about the whole story of him and Sublime, but it was kind of shortened because you can't jam that much history into one episode. And so, as you mentioned, because 2021 is the 25th anniversary of Sublime's self-titled album, and that album happened largely due to this man's efforts, we thought it would be fun to have him back. So, Jon, thank you so much for joining us again.
Right on. Thanks for having me back. It's good to be here.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure for us to get a chance to talk with you, and me personally, just to spend time with you. I think you're a great person. So, obviously, on this episode, we want to focus a lot on the self-titled album because so many people have lots of questions about it, and it's obviously been the most prolific of all of Sublime's albums. So we're just going to jump right into it. So as most people know, the album was recorded for the most part at Willie Nelson's studio in Austin, Texas, Pedernales. How soon after Sublime got signed with, I never know what to call it, so MCA, Universal Gasoline Alley, did they head off to Austin to start recording?
Exact timeline, I can't just say that.
Rough estimate.
When they signed with the label, and it was Gasoline Alley, which was the label that I worked for and was A&R executive at, a young A&R executive, and Gasoline Alley was a joint venture with MCA Records, which was part of the Universal Music Group. And Gasoline Alley was like a side label, a co-venture, and Skunk Records was the label that Sublime had, and Miguel that had been putting out the former titles. The band's original releases came out on Skunk Records, 40 Ounces of Freedom and Robin the Hood. So when the band signed, that was actually in the Robin the Hood kind of phase. It was 1994, summer of 1994, and they had the DAT. I think I might have shed some light on this the last time, but DAT tapes were the format. That was like the new, those were like a small little digital tape. And I remember just prior to signing, I was working on trying to get the label interested and Universal interested. But the band had come in with the DAT tape of Robin the Hood and hadn't yet really put that out. They're like, this is our new album. And Brad played me the song Cisco Kid. He put that on this is a hit. And it was a Doors sample. And I was like, well, you can't do that, But that, that was kind of the time period where they signed, and Robin the Hood came out on its own. The band released it independently before signing, and then when they did finally sign to Gasoline Alley in July of 1994, the next step was really to try to, I guess in my mind, offer Sublime the tools to record a world-class record. And what that meant, because Sublime was an unconventional band, to them, it was, let's rent a house and buy all of our own studio equipment and record in the house. And so I remember one of the first trips we took was down to Leucadia, and we scouted a bunch of houses for rent. I remember going to like 3 or 4 houses with Brad and Miguel, and looking at these places in Leucadia that the band was going to shack up in and live and bring in their own equipment and record like a homemade style record. And I thought that was unique, and wanted to provide them, that kind of comfort level to do something unconventional. We had read the stories about the Chili Peppers, doing a house recording in Hollywood with all their own stuff, and that happened to be Blood Sugar Sex Magic with Rick Rubin. So it was like the one thing we didn't have in that case was like the big mansion and Rick Rubin producing.
Yeah, I was going to say Rick Rubin would be the missing component there.
He was on the link, and the funny thing is, on the list, when the band came over and, we're like starting this journey and starting to decide like, or at least just discuss creatively, like, hey, what are we going to do for the next record? Because Robin the Hood was out there, and a lot of people misunderstood that album. It had Raleigh Theodore Saker's soliloquies that were dominating a lot of the attention span of, record execs or people that was extremely Sublime type of thing for them to have that on the album. But a lot of people, kind of focused on that.
Yeah.
What is this gibberish? And in between that were these songs like STP, Greatest Hits, Saw Red with Gwen. That was another homemade hodgepodge type record, which is part of the band's craft. So I was like, I wanted to respect that also because the creativity with a record like that seemed less homogenized to me. And I felt like that was one of the unique qualities about Sublime and Bradley's work on both records, 40 Ounces to Freedom and Robin the Hood. So I was like, fine, let's use some of the recording budget and give the band what they want and let them go in and at least pre-produce, if not come up with, great record, capture the magic, like we were talking about, wanted to have tape rolling, not on a studio clock where if the band was, in 4 a.m. having a bender, but they just happen to be in their zone, that, Miguel would be there capturing that. And that was kind of the first impetus of recording. But I still, in the other part of my mind, being at a label with tools and a budget, I really wanted to get the band, and the band wanted to. Miguel and Brad both asked me. It wasn't like, hey, toss Miguel aside. Like, it was like, let's just enhance this and see where we can go. And so we started talking about, who could actually produce Sublime. And I remember coming up with a wish list that I drew up that had everyone from Rick Rubin to the Dust Brothers. And I also had put on there, I always thought it'd be cool if Brad worked with Walter Becker and Donald Fagen and Steely Dan. So I even had that on there. Like it was a long shot type of things. When it came down to it, the band ended up saying, hey, let us go into this. They ended up, I don't know why we didn't do the Leucadia houses, because that was really cool. It was such a nice place to be down there and live. I know Brad really liked that and could get out of the Long Beach riffraff. That didn't happen. They ended up identifying a location that they decided to make a makeshift studio, and that was over on Anaheim Street in Long Beach, which became known as the Fake Nightclub. And Sublime came to me, was like, we found the spot, we want to rent it. They hooked me up, I remember, with the landlord of the place, like, pay for this is where we want to do it. And they ended up setting up shop in Long Beach at this kind of like dilapidated storefront warehouse, very indescript, right there on Anaheim. I forget the cross street, taco bars and little things, but it was pretty ghetto. And okay, well, that's where you guys want to do it. And they created the fake nightclub there. And that's where these initial recordings started to originate from. And it was pretty obvious at that point that these demos were coming out of there, that they were kind of for the purpose of demos and pre-production. But again, they're very lo-fi, piecemeal. I mean, definitely not what like signing to a label would enable. You know what I mean? That wasn't to me the ideal scenario, although it was a good, I think, place for the guys to start to put some stuff down. And remember sending those off then to producer lists, and two of the people that we had discussed, and one of them, Miguel, came to me and said, "What about David Kahn?" I was like, "Fishbone, David? Yeah, that makes sense. He was at Columbia Records and signed Fishbone and made Truth and Soul, and they're great recordings. And he also made a lot of great pop records of the 80s, and he was somebody that seemed to have, I don't know, kind of a dichotomy of styles and things. And
Right.
I really wanted the band to achieve a certain level of commercial success, or at least, you know, have that chance to make something that sonically would be actually played on the radio and could help break the band, achieve a bigger audience, you know, and I think that was the goal, and that's why we ended up choosing some of these producers. But David Kahn, he responded pretty quickly to the demos that we had sent and called me back. You know, Miguel was like, trying to get a hold of him, and I was like, I like that idea, and got a hold of David, and he responded back saying he really dug the music and was interested. And
Nice.
so that session actually ended up materializing before the Paul Leary sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And David came out here, and the band decided to go into Total Access Studios at that point with David Kahn.
Right.
And then the Paul Leary scenario was, I had just been listening to 40 Ounces, and, you know, the thank yous at the end of 40 Ounces to Freedom reference a lot of Sublime's influences and friends and bands that they were paying tribute to. And they said Butthole Surfers and the Meat Puppets.
Yes,
and I was
did.
like, what? You know, and I actually was talking to another friend of mine, somebody I was trying to interest in Sublime, not even like just a friend, not a music industry person. Check this music out. What do you think? And we both are big fans of the Meat Puppets, who had worked with Nirvana. And then we kind of realized in that conversation, well, you know, Paul Leary, the Butthole Surfers guitar player, he just produced a new Meat Puppets record, which was called Too High to Die, ironically enough. I just was like, man, this could be a real recipe. And Too High to Die was Meat Puppets were an indie band, and they definitely had that lo-fi indie rock sound. They were on indie labels coming up, and till Nirvana kind of anointed them as, you know, this huge influence on MTV, on the Unplugged record, where they covered Lake of Fire and Plateau. Paul Leary really drew the best sonically that we had heard out of the Meat Puppets, and Too High to Die had a song called Backwater that became a pretty big hit on FM radio. And I was like, that's it, you know, like, I love the mesh of the sound that Paul Leary got on that, and he's an actual artist that the band respects and loves, that actually pays tribute to on their older record, as well as the record he had just produced. He had also produced another successful radio record, sonically another really good one, by a band from Austin called the Toadies, that came out on Interscope Records. And I don't know, I just, you know, again, was always thinking, how do we get the most, you know what I mean, give the band the best choices, variety. Like, if they do some killer stuff at the home studio, great. Like, let's do David Kahn. He's more of a pop eye, and Paul Leary's more of, you know, an actual artist. And so that kind of became the array of producers. And the first sessions ensued with David Kahn, and there weren't really all these songs yet developed. David came out, and he got in the studio with the band at Total Access, which is in Redondo Beach, and, you know, no doubt Pennywise, a lot of history there. punk rock, but beach, California recording culture and a lot of the Sublime's idols. So they felt right at home. David Kahn didn't. He called me the next morning after the first session threatening to leave, and he told me that he didn't think that the band was ready or Brad was ready to record, and they just weren't unprepared. And he said you should send me home tomorrow. Don't waste your money. And I was just pretty shocked, taking it in stride though. I was like, well, David, I think you're probably used to doing a lot of sessions where he was working with Susanna Hoffs from the Bangles, and
sure,
he was known as a kind of tough personality in the studio as well. And he had the tension with Fishbone, where Fishbone actually punched him out when they recorded the record. So there's some lore about David Kahn. The label, Gasoline Alley, they had actually managed Susanna Hoffs, whose record he produced, so they knew David real well. And when I actually brought him up at first to the label execs, they were like, "No, he made Susanna cry." So I'm like, "Yeah, but he produced Fishbone," and they were actually kind of no. And so anyway, I told him, "Hey, David, listen, man. This is punk rock. It's not what you're probably used to right now, 80s, but I know these guys are going to come through. Brad's like a super talent, and just stick with it." And I feel like I remember telling them they're like the kid that's going to cram the night before their final exam and get at least an A-. So stick it out. And he went back to he did. He said, "Okay, I'll go back the next day." And the next day, I think, is where Miguel and Brad and him had some transparent communication about some of the other factors, being drugs and things like that were maybe affecting the mindset. And just David been around a long time, so it was, I think, better to probably he came into a situation with optimism but not a lot of knowledge about Sublime and who they were and how punk rock I think the approach was. And we all were hopeful that maybe lifestyle and habits weren't going to get in the way, and you just kind of never knew. It was always like a little bit of a crapshoot with all that. And
right.
I think David eventually, after having that second day in the studio, was like, okay, I get it, and he got really into it. And by the end of the fourth or fifth day in the studio, they had tracked What I Got, which there was previously a demo for that the band had done at Total Access himself without David. So we knew about that song and all had hugely high hopes for that to be, a hit maybe. They tracked Caress Me Down, which had no idea that was going to be part of it was going to be in Spanish. I remember hearing Brad messing with that song on acoustic guitar when we first went signed the band. I remember they got a check from the label, and I took them to the bank to cash it right by Universal. And I remember Brad had his acoustic guitar the day we went in there, and he was walked up to the bank with the high ceilings and all that, and he was belting out "Caress Me Down." And I was like, I always remembered that song. Yep, but true story. The band went in, cashed a check for 100 G's, and Brad's singing "Caress Me Down," and I always remember that song. So it was to hear that from the David Concepts, oh, that's that one you did in the bank. You know what I mean? And it was so different. And they did Miami, which turned out to be April 29th, 1992, but the working title was Miami. Right. And that, and then Doing Time. And honestly, you couldn't, from where Sublime had recorded before to where those 4 David Kahn tracks went, even before mixing, was David Kahn was playing piano on some. Yeah. Dave Aaron who worked with Snoop, was sequencing stuff. They turned these skeletons of songs into what I was just my ear hit, and I was like, man, this is next level, And this is before Leary, so I remember going into the studio, the mix studio with David Kahn when me and Brad and Miguel, I think, went down to Studio City, and he was at a studio called Scream, a famous mixing studio, and he was in there, and he was mixing those tracks, And I think at that time he also started working on the Sugar Ray track for what would become their big hit, The Fly, which I always thought, and I mean, it's not even think, I mean, this is just facts. Like, David Kahn took Sublime's recipe and then applied it to Sugar Ray.
Sugar Ray, yeah.
And he had the dance hall guy, Supercat, and it was like he took that same kind of what I got production approach, got the dance hall singer and Mark McGrath, and made this thing called The Fly that became another, super commercial hit with that kind of style, which, I mean, point blank, I mean, and Mark McGrath would admit it to this day because he's like that. He's a cool guy. But yeah, I mean, they just, imitation's the greatest form of flattery, it was just that. And anyway, I remember David was just starting on that, but he handed us these mixes on the cassette tape, and we didn't know what David was going to really do with the songs, and he gave it to Brad, and we went over to this little lounge room with a cassette deck and popped that tape in there, and we heard the mixes of What I Got, Doing Time, April 29th, and Caress Me Down. And I remember Brad took the tape out of the deck, didn't really say much. He just handed me the tape. He's like, well, Johnny, he's like, at least we got our money's worth. Gave me the cassette. I still have the cassette somewhere.
Oh, that's awesome.
Wow.
Yep. But I also think, to shed light on that time, even myself, there was a little bit of fear that maybe those were like not as, I don't know if edgy or hard enough, or they were just polished mixes and, kind of an approach that took Sublime beyond what they were doing themselves. And I think in a really good way, a way that, in a sense, needed to happen given the other chain of events that unfolded. Like, it gave it the treatment that needed to be kind of mass consumed, but still kept kind of the integrity. But I think that it was like, well, is this too pop? Is it, like, they were so good, but it was like, Paul Leary, let's get the band in a band setup where they can be themselves. And, that's when Leary was like, and we were also like wanting to get the band out of town. And there was also a split at that time between Gasoline Alley and a lot of the co-venture labels and MCA Records. There was like a turnover in the whole corporation of Universal. They dropped a lot of sub-labels. MCA was struggling as a rock music label. They were really having more success in country and hip-hop and R&B. And they were unsure because the new MCA regime came in. It transferred from Al Teller, who was a Gasoline Alley advocate and brought Gasoline Alley into the MCA family originally. He got booted for Jay Boberg and a new regime that kind of took over the MCA Records division. And Jay came over from Network Records, which was, had some early Police like affiliate. I mean, he's a guy that could understand. I think, he wasn't just a suit. He was a guy that had a music background. They didn't know what they were inheriting was Sublime, and I remember at that point, like, Gasoline Alley was losing like their financial co-venture partnership, so it was this nebulous time where didn't know if MCA was going to actually grant this budget to actually get the band to Texas. I put it up and all together, and all of a sudden, like, this thing happened where it was like, well. And I'm on the phone with Paul Leary going, yeah, they're coming out. And on the flip side, I'm like seriously scared that Universal was not going to like approve this budget and was going to have to be like, it's not happening. I wrote a long letter to Universal MCA people, and, Gasoline Alley backed me. They want to see this made because they were there for the whole journey leading up to that. And, they eventually approved the budget, which I think was around $60,000 or something for Leary to produce and all the expenses to get out to Austin. And that was the best decision I think that Jay Boberg probably made as the MCA new president. Was like, okay, he greenlit it, and the band was off in their RV to Texas, and Paul Leary was on, and he's like, yeah, send him out. I've got Willie Nelson's studio. Paternalis is famous, Willie Nelson's complex, and that's where I'm going to track the band. And that was a glorious day. And
So it was all about getting them out of their comfort zone, that getting them out of their area where all the stuff was going on, right?
that was definitely part of it. We wanted to give them the ability to have an experience recording and
Right.
just be in a unique environment. And Paul Leary, not having him be a Butthole Surfers guitar legend and one of the architects of alternative music, if you really think about it, he paved the way for what became alternative, really. And he was making credible, sonically complete recordings that were making on radio from cool bands. So it was kind of just about all of that, getting the guys with someone that they could, gel with, jive with, be comfortable, speak the same language, and ultimately try to get performances down that would hopefully be captured, in the right manner.
You guys certainly picked the right guys. There's no question about that, because it did exactly what you just said. I got to ask, Jon, because I've been thinking this since we started chatting here, and maybe you can clear it up. Maybe it's rumor and innuendo, but the rumor is that, and you kind of said that there wasn't a lot of songs ready, put together. What was the plan? I mean, you said you guys started talking about, getting producers and who's going to do it. Did you know that, at this point, Brad really didn't even have an album written? Or was it just like, hey, Brad's a superstar and we're just going to get in there and he's going to make something happen?
I was kind of reading between the lines on the stuff they did at the fake nightclub and some things that I had heard before that, like just raw versions. Had a lot of belief in, that they would magically, Brad would come up with stuff. And I don't know if you guys read the article in The Ringer, but that, to me, out of all the 25th anniversary articles that came out about the album, really is the most comprehensive, the most colorful, like the realest details.
It was a great article.
Yeah, of that whole process. Like, that was real journalism. Like, I went deep into, that depicted as close, there were some factual inaccuracies and things like that, but that depicted really, I think, probably the best, and truest of the, written work on that experience. And it's like it says in that, even Bud and Eric were like worried and looking at each other like, we don't have any songs, and it's tough. Sometimes I've noticed in the musician's career, the first album, and this was the case with Sublime, all these songs were written. There were demos of it. They've been playing them live. Before they went into 40 ounces, they had a lot of music and songs. Robin the Hood was piecemeal with a lot of stuff they probably did on the spot, but then they had the 6 or so songs they did with Epitaph that were kind of more cohesive songs that I think the band were playing live. And then on this record, it was like we really hadn't heard much of this material. Santeria was Lincoln Highway dub, which
Sure.
Eric says in the article. He's like, yeah, that we had that one. I wrote that one, but it was like that was just an instrumental, And the crazy thing is that when Leary, the first thing he sent me back from those sessions was a finished version of Lincoln Highway Dub that was now called Santeria. And there was a complete song that we heard, and just the whole way Brad's voice, that immediately gave me huge hope of what was going to come out of that studio. But he said, he sent me that early because maybe it was one of the first ones they had finished, and a couple others, but really kind of hit the nail on the head with that, making it a complete song from Lincoln Highway Dub to Santeria. So, I had faith. I know that during the conversations of that recording process in Texas, I was talking to Brad verbally over the phone, and I just remember still echoing him saying, man, he's like, lyrics are hard. He's like, man, Johnny, lyrics are hard. So I think he was having his own, struggles living up to expectations he wanted to be as a writer or a poet, or, however he viewed himself. But the Ringer thing says, how this was cut on tape, and so they were like really cutting tape, not just Pro Tools where they're being able to mix and comp all this stuff. It was like a pretty laborious process, but I think they let the guys go and let Brad go, and how they pieced these things together ended up making a lot of sense, and they did a great job producing those songs there, especially given those circumstances, because I don't think it was like fluid. We know it's not. It wasn't like, here's the next 13 songs, we're just going to go track them all and just perform. Brad was making a lot of lyrics up on the spot, and I know he was going back from the studio to the hotel and trying to write lyrics. And also, I remember coming home and turning in and us listening to this full record, and he was like, man, he's like, get me to Jamaica. He's like, I want to record again. It's like, man, this isn't 40 ounces. Like, he seemed to be disappointed, like he could conquer more and do more than he did on this record, and some of that was, I think, when he got back from Austin and started to clean up, because as the Ringer article depicts, and as pretty much history is written, that that was not a pretty picture down in Austin. It was unraveling as things were going on and getting to be a more dangerous, like, kind of environment. And he came back. I think Bradley was having that realization, at least telling me, like, hey, man, like, it's not 40 ounce. I'm like, yeah, but dude, you came through with flying colors. This is such a fucking great record. Like, it's like, well, get me down to Jamaica, man. I want to record more, like the next one or whatever. And that was, remember, one of the last conversations I had with Brad, as he was telling me, like, I want to go record in Jamaica, which I wish we would have had the opportunity to do, because that was definitely next. But as I said, I mean, came through with flying colors and then some, and a record that's now obviously a classic. And
yeah, it's legendary. It's absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So you kind of said that Brad was like, yeah, it's good, but he thought maybe he had some better in him, or he was ready to get started on the next project. Do you remember specifically, like, Dave and Paul's reaction when there was a finished product? Like, did you guys look at each other and realize what just happened, or was it just like, oh yeah, this was another good album, I guess, that we put out?
In the David Kahn sessions at Total Access, in the very, like, last day, when David was, like, finally happy and, like, was glowing in his face because he knew he did something great with the band. I mean, he also still told me on the side, he's like, man, he's like, you were right, but he's like, I wish we had a song. He's like, I wish we had a song. I mean, like, I don't think he knew that he produced 4 hits, or at least, you know what I mean, 2.5. And I mean, What I Got became a huge, huge hit, and I would have to say that all 4 of those songs they didn't reach the same commercial capacity or chart position as What I Got, but What I Got, Press Me Down, Doing Time, and April 29th are all classics. And David Kahn was kind of the producer that was still saying, man, I wish we had that song. I wish we had the song. And I remember when he said that, I'm like, well, did you record Profit? Because there's a song floating around between Bradley and Miles from Slightly Stupid that they recorded together early on. And I was like, that one. And I remember talking to Bradley about possibly recording that. I think David had heard it, but they never got around to recording it. And I always thought I Ain't No Prophet was going to be one that Sublime took to, new heights. And that one has a lot of history to it and has floated around now in the Slightly Stupid repertoire for all these years, and is kind of a shared classic, I think. But yeah, there was.
Where's the tape, John? Where is the tape from that Brad and Miles session?
That one is actually, there's a version of it on the end of the Slightly Stupid self-titled, like, hidden.
Yeah. Yeah, the hidden track is there, but there's been some still frames put out there. There's been a few teased leaks. Somebody has that full set of Brad sitting in Miles's living room and the two of them jamming. That tape's out there. I know you've seen it. Where is it?
Dude, I wish if I knew, then, it probably would have seen the light of day, possibly.
Fuck.
I know. As I recall, in terms of, like, archive type stuff, Miles' mom recorded a lot of that stuff. I know that they donated tapes at a certain point. Well, not donated, but like lent their tapes to one of the early like movie projects, and I want to say Stories, Tales, Lies, one of those. There was always a little bit of like a bitter sentiment I remember from Miles' mom about not ever getting those tapes back. And at the time, I mean, Josh Fischel was the videographer who was kind of messing with that stuff with Zach and that thing. And I mean, Josh unfortunately passed away over time. So I don't know that the known whereabouts of those are. If anybody does, I mean, those really are property of Lori, Miles' mom. And I know because I've seen like videos from the stuff and heard about it. And Lori's asked herself, "Hey, do you know where those are? Can you get them back for me?" So I don't know. I mean,
Listen, community, if you're hearing this, let's do the right thing. You go ahead and send me those tapes, and I will make sure to get them back to their rightful owner. No questions asked. I'll be happy to review them because I know they're floating around out there somewhere. So obviously you guys realized, like you said, you heard these songs, you knew that they were great songs. I'm sure you didn't anticipate a 7-time platinum album. I don't think anybody thinks that when they're sitting there. They just know that they made a good album. Do you remember like at what point the excitement really started to build for you guys watching the numbers? From some of the research that I was able to do, obviously we know the album came out on July 30th. In October of 96, it said that, there was like 150,000 units sold up to that point. And then it got to a point in April 97 when it cracked the top 20 on billboards that it was doing like 40 to 50,000 copies a week. Do you remember the point where somebody came up to you and said, "Attaboy, you got a slap on the back from somebody at some point"? Do you remember when that started?
I mean, first off, for me, when I heard 40 Ounces to Freedom and finally clicked with me and got it, I mean, I really did think that Sublime could be a multi-platinum musical entity. Not to like toot my own horn, but I mean, I told Gasoline Alley, like, this could be the next Nirvana, but, the same risks are involved. Like, we've got a volatile, possible, cult anti-hero and somebody that is more creative and has more talent than anyone I know. I was like, I'll bet the farm on the music, but here's the other risks, So I kind of always believed it. And I think, anyone that knew me back in the early days and realized too, I was a 23-year-old, like basically a kid just getting started in the music business with the rare opportunity of, working for a label. My uncle was a partner in the label. So it's how I kind of got the gig out of college. I paid some dues early. I was really into music. And when I heard when 40 Ounces clicked, Bad Fish, 40 Ounces of Freedom, and, those songs on that record, Don't Push, Right Back, Get Out, I mean, I already knew. So it really was a crusade for me from that point on to try to instill that belief in other people, despite whatever obstacles came about. And ultimately, with the recording, well, and to tell you the truth, before this record even got going recording wise, when Sublime signed the record deal, the first thing that I kind of instructed the label and marketing to do, that we all wanted to do, that believed in Sublime, because there was a younger group of people that were kind of Skunk Records kids, me, Zach, like Greg Abrams. So we all knew, I think, there was something inherently very, very special about this. And at that point, we're like, we got some time before the next record. Let's get these other songs out. So we made the combination disc with the Tabasco label, a promo disc that had what we thought were the best songs from 40 Ounces and the best from Robin the Hood. And those all got put on a promotional disc that we sent to all the radio stations across the land, including K-Rock. And Date Rape wasn't even a song that we put on that disc because there are so many great songs. That wasn't even one that we wanted to have hit radio first, but Organically, obviously it did. We had put a Date Rape outtake on that little one. We knew it was popular when the band was playing live. We also knew at that point the band was kind of stopped playing it too. But I think we all felt like a lot of this music, maybe it wasn't recorded for the masses, but the message and the music and the raw, genius, honest quality about it, no matter what, could all hit a massive audience. And so I think that process started on those first two records with that combined promo disc, the Tabasco label one, and then Date Rape hits, and the band achieves this other level of success. And it's like, okay, we finally proved like there's something there. Radio responded to something without really us even trying, and the fans responded. All K-Rock had to do was put Date Rape on, and there was already a cult following in Los Angeles. It was just ready. It was culturally ready too, and that music had been bubbling. And like Brad to me really was the guy who he encapsulated it all into these incredible songs. And no doubt in 311 we're getting this like head start, so to speak, but like saving the best for last, and Brad was right there. So that being said, upon getting these recordings, and mainly those 4 David Kahn songs and then Santeria from Paul, and when I heard Santeria, I forget David Kahn's, already knew those were sick, but when I heard Santeria, I sent that immediately to these like label execs for like, listen to this, like, and I think at that point really was the first point that maybe the more corporate people were started like, oh well, there's something here, like this is, and it was sonically and presentably in a non-lo-fi manner. I mean, it just sounded so rich and great the way that they recorded it out there with Paul. So yeah, I mean, at that point, and at the point I was telling you, then the new MCA regime comes in, and I'd sit down with Jay Boberg. It's like me, him, and Brad had dinner when the band was playing the House of Blues shows, April of '96, and that's the first time a lot of these people ever saw Sublime. Before they saw them, we went out to a record label dinner. I'm saying that like in quotations or kind of facetiously. I've told this story before. I mean, Jay Bober was like, let's go over to Marmont Hotel across the street and the bar or whatever. And that's where like, John Belushi, all the celebs hang out. It was like a posh, like cool place to go. And Brad was wearing flip-flops for the House of Blues shows. And so we tried to go over there and they wouldn't let us in. No flip-flops. No shoes, no shirt, no dice type of thing. It's like Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And so we're like, where do we want to go? And Brad's like, let's just go to McDonald's. And there's like a McDonald's across the street. And I remember this is before the night and before the House of Blues and the first meeting with the MCA people. And it's me, Bradley, and Jay Boberg. And we walk over to McDonald's and we sat down at this McDonald's. Brad had like some cheeseburgers or something, and we talked. And I remember sitting there, and Jay Boberg was like, yeah, if we do, 250 to 500,000 or 600,000. And I was just shaking my head going like, what? Like, under my breath because I was playing the game. But like, I was like, no, what? I was already thinking millions, platinum, and we needed, so I think the expectations within the building of, the commercial music, corporate music, they had lower expectations. Same thing. I kind of felt like if the band could endure, the issues that were self-destructive and could actually last like on the road for a year or two. I mean, I kind of was thinking, and I said it, I was like, dude, this is like a combination of the Grateful Dead and the Beastie Boys, and it's going to be the next biggest like stadium act. So I'm going to put in perspective. I mean, I always had the belief, and the crazy thing about it is the circumstances which it did achieve success were bittersweet. I mean, Brad wasn't here to really see what his creation with his band had garnered, the success and the acceptance, not the reverence, of his soul and how people, took to that. And it is like when it finally happens like that, and you kind of, this isn't something that you plan for, ever expect, but the guy who was its creator wasn't there anymore, and then it takes on this new life of success, acceptance, and it's on the radio, and and that was kind of the bittersweet kind of payoff that you were right, and this music had a spirituality about it that couldn't be denied, and so that part is really surreal, and it still is to me today, 25 years later, when all these articles start coming out, and when you're there and you're doing it, you don't always have the perspective to look at it and feel it. And a lot of people always go, well, do you know like what you're responsible for? Do you know that? And I always shake it off because it kind of embarrasses me, and I'm not like completely comfortable with all that. But it is it's something that I can only say it's like otherworldly, spiritual. There's a comfort level in the fact that it happened at this level, and that's what we were living for back then when we were in the moment. And much respect for everybody involved in the process that helped to make it come to fruition. My greatest fear would be, and back at that time, would be that this music wouldn't see the light of day. And I do remember sitting there in like a board meeting with the MCA Universal people, and not knowing. Sublime's biggest commercial success at that point was Date Rape, which was, a massive hit on K-Rock. It didn't ever really hit on the national level, at least at radio, and that was what they had to gauge it on internally, in the record label side. But to like see What I Got get put out as the first single and achieve this massive commercial radio success, like the first week it got released, that was validation, and that's when the lights turned on for everybody else. Like, holy shit, like, we've got something. I said that before, too. There was a discussion with Universal where we literally were pleading with them, hey, everybody's worked tremendously hard for years on this thing, and the family really wants this music to come out, and so does the street. It's always about the street, and I'm like, dude, the street they need this. It's like, are waiting for this. It's a cultural movement and moment, and the biggest fear was that it wouldn't see the light of day due to politics, and there was exploitation issues, and there was legal things going on behind, all those things.
Sure.
And there's a lot of politics that go behind the release of a record, especially at a major label, and especially when you're navigating a major label that has a brand new group of people that weren't really there through the whole process. They're not necessarily connected to it the same way. And I mean, there's so many records every day, that like in a record label, just because you're on the label doesn't mean that you're a priority. And
right.
Sublime, I mean, the artist wasn't there to tour anymore. There was like, there's this thing that happened that nobody necessarily really wants to talk about too much in public, and I actually remember during that time too, once Sublime, and like you said, okay, then by August it came out, by September, October, there's 150,000 sales. It's just starting at radio. What I Got's getting all this play. Who knew that what MCA was going to do, like Service, another single, was going to have the same thing. Wrong Way, I believe, came next, and kind of just kept the train moving. Santeria catches fire. We're doing posthumous videos. MTV is still alive and well at that point. I think that was a big part, that Sublime's What I Got video was the first song and the biggest commercial hit, and MTV started really catching on to that. And once you got into that rotation, I think you start seeing record sales skyrocket. And the video for What I Got, I'm really proud of. It won the video for the best alternative video for that year. And it starts getting put in those conversations. And, I mean, at the time, I know Beck was out there on commercial radio with Loser, with songs kind of like I feel like fit in the Sublime kind of vein. And there was No Doubt, I guess, was popping a little, at that point. But it culturally and sonically, that What I Got song, like that propelled the initial commercial success. And then boom, from there, Wrong Way, Santeria.
Yeah, it was a rocket ship.
And unfortunately, again, some of those posthumous videos, I think What I Got holds up the best for, what really encapsulates the spirit of Sublime and Long Beach. And there's something very real to that video to me still. And, that's kind of at that point is when it's like, whoa, okay. We sold 5 million records. They sold,
right.
That's
well,
a lot. Like,
it's always, you'll always have that one person that says, well, yeah, the guy died and they sold, that's why they sold 6 million records. And I actually had somebody say that to my face one time. And I said, you know what, buddy? I said, you're absolutely right. I couldn't agree with you more, because if Brad would have been able to take that album on tour, it would have sold 25 million. So I agree with you. I agree with you with what you're saying. That's true.
Well, and what I was getting to, too, about the conversation no one wants to have, what I noticed from a PR standpoint is there was something going on in the world at that time that was greater and bigger than this culture, like Sublime stuff or alternative, and that was called hip-hop. And in hip-hop was the biggest commercially successful music of that era. Hip-hop was up there, probably beating out rock from just a straight up sales perspective across the board. And the big deal that was being made at all these video award shows and on MTV, and what was happening concurrently at the same time, but in the hip hop culture, was that you had the Biggie and Tupac scenario going down. Like, both had, I'm pretty sure at that time both had died, but at least one. There was a shooting. There was like gangster rap and violence and people dying. And that was the PR topic. That was what was being discussed in every major music publication, on MTV, on every major show. And those dudes were already superstars. Bradley Nowell and Kurt Cobain was already dead. Bradley Nowell was not even known. He was a superstar that had played to the least amount of people for how popular that his legacy got and his music got. I don't think there's anyone that's played for less people than Sublime to be as famous as that music is. And
it's funny you say that, because I had it in my notes here. One of the questions I wanted to ask you was, is Sublime the most successful band that nobody ever got to see?
I would say so. I think when there was a comparison, and going back to like the thing with Jay Boberg and MCA, thinking about, I was like Andrew Wood and Mother Love Bone. Andrew Wood became this like cult superhero in the grunge scene before Pearl Jam and Soundgarden hit. And they made a record for him called Temple of the Dog that everyone compiled on, and that launched Hunger Strike, one of the first grunge hits, as that movement was happening. But their guy who kind of started that there was a guy named Andrew Wood, the lead singer of Mother Love Bone. And there was that kind of cult side of it. Was like, hey, is that what Brad's going to be in the perspective of this whole sonic landscape that's Southern California? Or, that was definitely a thought. And as far as, I don't know where I was going with that, but, I think as far as the most popular band, that name or whatnot, I think the least amount of people saw Sublime. Kurt Cobain had already been in Europe doing Coliseums. There had already been these huge, and Sublime basically, like, they did the Warped Tour, I remember one year for New Year's Eve was Pearl Jam opened, Nirvana played second, and the Chili Peppers closed. And that was an arena tour in the Cow Palace, and in Southern Cal was the Forum, or, like they were already playing huge places. And Sublime's biggest date to that point had been like probably the end of the Warped Tour, where maybe they played to 4,000 people. So putting in perspective, I definitely have to say that, that's the phenomena here, is like that's the biggest, those resonant artists that nobody really got to see, you know?
Yeah, it's outrageous the amount of albums they sold compared to the amount of tickets that they sold. It's I don't think anybody has a bigger ratio. Now, Jon, I've got to ask you because with the 25th anniversary, it's something that I've been following very closely. And yes, I'm a huge fan, and I love the Noel family. I also understand that the music industry is a business, and that the record labels are basically investing. They're putting money out in hopes to get a lot of money back from these artists. Bud did an interview recently where he said 2 weeks after Brad passed, the record label told them find a new singer and hit the road.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on that. Go ahead and finish your thought. But
is this something that you remember happening? Was it ever a discussion? Was it ever thought about?
Nope. 100% can tell you no, and I could tell you that not to throw anyone under the bus or anything, but like one thing that for me has always kind of irked me quite a bit is like there's a lot of anachronism, that is present in the way that some of those events have been remembered, and the way that the Ringer magazine article, which I was citing before, said like, well, there's like 4 different sides of the story. If you were there, then you couldn't remember it right, or something like that. There's been a lot of irresponsible like commentary like that, which I'm not personally, like I said, yeah, you probably didn't remember, you were knee deep in doing that. So if you remember, but 100% was not the case whatsoever. Long Beach Dub All-Stars was the call after that. There was no label. The label didn't even know. There was no, label presence that was sitting there, dictating anything. This music took a life of its own, and within the context of that, we put some benefit shows together called Enough Already that were associated with MAP, the Musicians Assistance Program, and bringing awareness. My point, actually segueing into this, my point about the press and the PR around hip-hop and Biggie and Tupac's death, and that was propelling this huge commercial wave of hip-hop and sales and all that. The thing that really bugged me, too, at that point is the PR machine wasn't there telling the story about Sublime and like in that culture, people that were dying of other causes like gangster rap. It was shootings, In our scene, there was Cobain, there's Andrew Wood, there's Shannon Hoon. It's the age-old, young, 28-year-old singer-songwriter in that other culture that's not hip-hop, and they were dying of drug overdoses. And, being that this is Bradley's house and you have a whole penchant to try to, help and solve these issues and give people help, it was odd to me, and I know why. It's because nobody knew who Brad Noel was. Nobody met Sublime yet. The first time anyone saw them in a big stage was like at the Billboard Awards. So you know what I mean? Like the press, I'm saying. And so they didn't get the coverage. This story didn't get the coverage. And 5 million people, 4.5 million people that bought that record on that first year didn't even know Bradley was dead. So it is a whole other scenario there where, and then, leading to the fact that like, no, the label didn't say that. Not my label, not me, not Gasoline Out. Someone maybe muttered that as a joke, you know what I mean? But there was no real effort to be, nobody would ever do that. Like one thing, my respect to everybody involved with the making of Sublime's self-titled record. There's a lot of people that put a lot of time, heart, soul, blood, sweat, tears, talent.
Of course.
And those are the people that should be recognized on that. And, thankfully, again, like 25 years later, the music has more relevance than it ever has. I'm always sitting here thinking to myself, and during this whole like pandemic, like, man, what would Brad Noel be saying right now? I wanted to hear, it was like,
or creating.
Yeah, it was just like that's the part that is outside of the the things that we touched on. The part that's tough sometimes. Like, you just wish you had your friend that made that music that was so good that, like, man, I always think about that. Like, what would Bradley be doing today?
Yeah, there's so many artists through this whole pandemic that have come up with just some great material and really impressive stuff. And that's one thing that has struck me is like, during all of this, during the shutdown, during all this time of having to completely change the way that you're living your life and interacting with the world, it would have been very interesting to see what he would have come up with.
He would have been going nuts. He'd have been playing in front of every store, at the end of every pier. There's no way he'd going that long without playing. The police would be chasing him away for having gatherings with no masks. Mm-hmm. He'd be, 53 years old, hightailing it down the beach with his guitar in his hand. Well, 28 years old. Because there's no way that he would be able to go that long without getting music out of him. I don't know what he would have done.
Think about this. I mean, if we had, like, Brad and Sublime, or just Brad on acoustic, like, streaming to us every,
Oh, yeah.
That would have been like. Because, it's kind of a part of our lives the last, like, year and a half was
right.
Actually being able to have our favorite artists in our living room, from their living room,
right.
Doing something totally different. And it's a different experience, and I mean, it would have been amazing to hear Bradley playing new songs on the acoustic, great, anything. I mean, he would have come up with all kinds of stuff, I bet.
I'm sure, but
I think take the medium of what was there. I feel like Brad would have been one of those artists that, like, relished in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he would have. You're right.
Yeah, I hate those ifs, man. If my aunt had a dick, she'd be my uncle. No.
Do you have to edit that out?
Yeah, probably, but we won't. Yeah.
You keep firing questions. You know what I mean? All you want. One thing that I was going to say is, if you wanted to do one of those things, like kind of like where they ask Eric about songs or go through the record, I mean, I could give you guys.
I got some questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And that's actually one of the things I was going to bring up. I know that obviously you've been watching the articles come up. Did you see, I believe it was Billboard that ranked all of their songs self-titled. They ranked the songs in order to what they believed was the worst to best song on the album. Did you catch that list?
I think that's one of the ones that I'm talking about. Yes.
Yeah, they had that little... I'm not going to lie to you. My favorite song on self-titled, my favorite song in the history of music, any song, any musician, my number one favorite song is JailHouse by Sublime. So I was very shocked when I saw they had that one listed that way. Did you take exemption to that list?
Dude, I did. Let's talk about that right there.
Let's get into it.
When I first heard Sublime play JailHouse, and I want to say it was at the Golden Sales Hotel. It was one of these shows where, I don't know, total, I think it was them and the Mentors, or El Duce was there. I remember that night. It was like this crazy, like, lobby scene in Golden Sales Hotel, or whatever that one is.
Yes.
At PCH and Second.
Yeah, it's Golden Sales.
Uh-huh. I remember Bradley had these green black flies on, and it was just one of those real down-home Long Beach shows. El Duce, the Mentors running around. It was mayhem in there. And I remember, because there's kind of like no stage. It was almost the band was like in the same level as the audience, and Brad was in there. And I remember him busting into JailHouse that night, just that like slow beat and then it was like, what's this song? And it was like, start singing, Jet Rudy gets planted. And it was like, what's that? Because we hadn't really heard it before. And that particular song, it became definitely a favorite of mine. I really loved that whole obscure Jamaican it's a lot what he did, but with the newer songs like JailHouse and then Crazy Fool, which didn't make the album. It's on the Live at the Palace 3-Ring Circus. And he says something at the end of Live at the Palace 3-Ring Circus. He's like, well, we'll see you here next year, and we'll see how that one is then. Like, he was just starting to get that one readied, for those obscure Jamaican classics that came from, JailHouse wasn't written by Sublime. It was actually written by Bob Marley, from what I understand. but there's also somewhat of a discrepancy in terms of if Bob Marley actually wrote it or if it was one of these ones that kind of came more from the Jamaican folk, whatever passed down, maybe even earlier. I believe Marley gets final credit for writing it, but interestingly enough, it made the album and was super, super stoked that that made the album. Another one that was kind of floating there in that vein was 89 Vision, like that group of songs for Sublime. Don't remember if it got attributed to Bob Marley or just traditional on the initial press of the self-title, but I was excited that made it. I always loved him playing that song live. And I got the chance recently. I was in the studio in Miami with Stephen Marley, Bob Marley's son. He's working on his new album. And we were just talking about music, and I was, kind of, Stephen Marley likes Slightly Stupid a lot. And, he's like, Stephen Marley, like, he's seen some of these younger bands, and he likes them, and he's like an 8-time Grammy producer, artist. And I was like, Steven, have you ever heard JailHouse? Do you know the song JailHouse? Apparently your dad wrote it, JailHouse. And I'm like, have you ever heard the Sublime version of it? And I said, hey, man, let me send you this. And I sent him the Spotify link of JailHouse so he could listen to that song done by Sublime on the self-titled. That was just a couple of weeks ago. I haven't talked to him to see what he thought of it or if he listened to it yet. But I was, for JailHouse, I was really excited to be like, hey, man, check out this version of it. That's the Sublime.
Yeah, it's my all-time favorite song, and I'm a huge music fan. I've got a ton of, but I can't explain why it's that song. I don't really have an answer for it. It just is. It's just everything about that song. And when I saw that was number one on the list,
number one worst, yeah, definitely not. But.
Well, he had it listed as the best.
Oh,
number one,
the best. Okay.
The best song. Now, here's the problem,
what I
right?
said to that, again, that's not one that Brad actually wrote per se, so he made it to his own. So I have to say, a lot of times that stuff happens, and
it's an interpretation, though.
Fortunate Youth did that one for Bradley's House.
Yeah, they did a great job.
And they do a really good job on that too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Kelly's like a real singer with a real voice and is really he has his own style. And sometimes when I say, well, people think that's a Sublime song, that one actually was more of a straight cover or an interpretation, like you said, as much of Brad's music. But dude, none of us would ever know that song if it wasn't for Bradley. And go back and listen to other versions of it. And if you could ever find, I think Dave Zlackett might have filmed that Golden Sales one. There is definitely video footage of Bradley doing JailHouse at that show. Epic.
Nice.
Epic.
Yeah, there's a couple of live JailHouses where Brad doesn't have the lyrics worked out yet, and it is an interpretation of a song that is similar but it's nowhere near. Ray Kroc didn't invent the fucking cheeseburger, but most people think McDonald's did. You know what I mean? So I do agree with you there, but the list is a little skewed anyway because he's got the worst song on the album as "Wrong Way," and it's because he doesn't like the lyrics.
Right.
So, what the fuck, buddy?
That was one of the ones that just makes me think, this is so pedestrian, you should actually go do the work, It's almost irresponsible journalism. It's just a fun, opinionated kind of piece, but it's like a dilettante's view of the record.
The song is called "Wrong Way." It's not called "Do This, Everybody." It's called "This is the wrong way to live and think and do things." So I'm not sure why people get so bent out of shape about it, because again, it's Brad's basically saying this is the wrong way. Don't do this. This isn't a good lifestyle. But somebody out there has indeed done this. But nonetheless, you don't like the lyrics to it, so it's the worst song on the album, which is outrageous.
Yeah, definitely don't agree with that one either. That's real life shit told by a storyteller that saw it, and made it into a caper of his own. And
subjective, which is fair.
Yeah, and Date Rape, same way, those edgy Sublime songs that at the end, the resolve is, some kind of justified punishment.
Right, right.
And the social commentary leaves it up to you to kind of interpret, you know what I mean? But
you got to get to the end.
yeah.
Right. You got to get to the end to learn that rape is not good and the guy is punished by getting raped. So that's, yeah.
What I love about Bradley is he was just playing with words on those things and having fun with these scenarios that really did give you a glimpse into like real life from that experience. And I mean that was happening right in front of their eyes, and they're chronicling this experience. And I think a creative kind of fun way to get you hooked to take, and I think that was part of the also antagonist nature of Brad's art in a sense, is to have that, taboo about what he's saying in a sense,
right.
Like any great music the music of the street is going to say things bluntly, and hip hop does that too. And, Brad did
of course.
He meant to do that, and that's part of that.
Yeah, and at the time it was edgy, and now I think sometimes it can be construed as flippant, but I think at the time it really was intended to be like a wake-up call of like, hey, let's talk about this shit. This stuff is real.
And Brad was like 23 when he wrote Date Rape. So let's not forget that, right? Like people think that like, oh wow, I'm 50 listening to this song and it doesn't age well. Well, nobody knows what a 50-year-old Brad would have been writing about, but at 23, people think and act differently. So it's something that doesn't get taken into consideration. And it's funny because it's like you don't get grandfathered in for like previous stuff that's okay, but you've got songs on the radio now that like, Foster the People has a song about school shootings, and it's on the radio in the mall. All the little kids with the pumped up kicks better learn to run from my bullets. Like, it's a song's about school shooting, and you're playing it in fucking Macy's while I'm getting my kid a sweater for Easter. That's okay. But indiscretions from a 23-year-old who wrote a song back in 93.
Right.
I get it.
Well, in this generation, if Sublime was just coming out with that music, good luck. We weren't in this kind of new era of, I don't want to get political really, but like there's some things that, people are real hypersensitive today, and back then maybe weren't as much, so it'd be interesting to see how some of those things would be taken in today's media, if Sublime was a super popular artist and then it was like they dropped something like Mary, like, oh my God, you know what I mean? Like that, right. Or Wrong Way, or, Date Rape, whatever. We're in a hypersensitive, media-driven, society at this point. And
sure.
Mary,
not politically correct.
I think Mary's a beautiful love song, and he says that he will not go so far deep inside her tonight. So,
oh, no. Okay, now we're going to have to edit that.
Oh, my God. Wasn't going there.
No. No, Jarett, no.
He says he will not.
Yeah, Anna, go ahead and make a note to edit.
I don't think I can.
All right, back on track, Jarett.
So, Jon, you know how sometimes you go and you see the shrink and they show you a picture and they want to know what your immediate response is to it. We've all seen it on TVs and movies. When you see the self-titled Sublime album cover, you see the Sublime tattoo from shoulder to shoulder and Brad's silly red hair in it. What's the first thing that comes to mind?
Interesting. I was going to comment on and say I wanted to, like, that particular album cover happened after, posthumously, after Brad had passed. The original title for the record was called Killin' It. And then it became Killin', like when the band was discussing, like, what's this record going to be called? We were all trying to think of the title, right? Bradley, too. And I remember it was Killin' It, How I Spent My Summer Vacation. And that's in, I have, scribbles and things like, probably in my archives that have that on it by the band. And the original art cover was going to be the clown in the easy chair that is underneath the CD. Opie's, what I don't want to say was his caricature of Bradley, because there's like an older clown and whatnot. But I mean, the truth of the matter is the record was going to be called Killing It, How I Spent My Summer Vacation, and the cover was going to be that drawing. And you see in the footage and the pictures, because no one's, I think, seen the footage, but where Brad is holding up to the last show, the audience at the end of the show, he's holding up the album, he's holding up the artwork. He's got the picture. Todd Kaplan shot that picture of Bradley where he's holding up the artwork and he's telling people about the new album. And that artwork is the Opie Clown. And at that point in time, it had a lot more details in the picture itself. It had syringes and it was cleaned up later to be acceptable in the CD given the circumstances, and it was made the tray art as opposed to the cover, which I think respectfully so, after everything that did happen, the cover is a testament to Bradley and that tattoo that Opie drew, and it's just such an iconic. I feel like, that's what needed and deserved to be the record cover under those, unfortunate circumstances. It becomes a tribute to Brad, his back, the band's name, and there's so much symbolism in that. His red color hair at that point, and the lotus flowers that Opie drew. But in all honesty, the band was going for Killing It, How I Spent My Summer Vacation, and, the clown art in its X-rated, PG-13 rated version.
Whose call was it to nix obviously it makes sense and I understand, but somebody had to initiate the tough conversation. Do you remember who said, we can't call it this?
I don't know. I feel like that was probably a collective. Can't really remember the details on that one. I think everybody that was close enough knew to do the respectful thing, and I forget how that picture actually surfaced. Maybe Jason Westfall. Opie took it, when he took the tattoo, and I think that one was going to be in the packaging maybe anyway. But yeah, as things worked out, that really became the image that made the most sense. And look, that immortalized Sublime, and that tattoo is real life. It's Brad's back. You could draw so much into that. So sometimes the universe has a way of working things out, and that just happened to be the right thing to do.
No, absolutely. It's and again, it's an iconic cover, and it's just something that the second you see it, you know exactly what you're seeing. So I actually had it in my notes here about the name change. I didn't know about the How I Spent My Summer part, though. That's something that I actually just learned about. So
Killing It, and then How I Spent My Summer Vacation, and then if you look at that clown picture, the guy's inside. I want to say maybe there's a pool outside, but there was another title being kicked around called Poolside. I remember discussing that for a little bit, but ultimately, pretty sure before Brad's passing, was Killing It, How I Spent My Summer Vacation.
Wow. So back to my question, when you see that cover, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? What's the first thing that you think of?
I want to turn it around and see Bradley smile.
Yeah, that would, I can totally understand that. It's something that's, I can totally see where you're coming from on that. So what would you say is the legacy of the self-titled album? It's something that you were such a huge part of, and we've talked about it now in 2 episodes, and realistically, I think we all know that if it wasn't for you, we're probably not having this conversation. Now, I know you're not going to say that, but let's be honest, if you weren't there really kind of quarterbacking this thing and pushing, we may not be sitting here and having this conversation and talking about Sublime. What is the legacy of that album to you?
Honestly, it's almost everything. It's the culmination of, a journey that started for me in late 93, 94, hearing this music and meeting these guys that were colorful characters that, it's just the stamp on a journey that got cut short, too soon, unfortunately. But at the same time, just I see that, and it's the victory as well. It's like that actually, by the grace of God, was made it to the general public, and the world got to hear this music, open them up to the rest of Sublime's music, and the world got to instead of thousands of people, millions upon millions of people embraced. And it's like music that's helped people get through their lives and been a soundtrack to their lives, including my own. It just is the indelible stamp that just, I think of it in the context of, Sublime's got 40 ounce Robin the Hood and self-titled. It's like they're three major full album statements, and it just kind of, it reminds me of Hendrix, Nirvana, and that's the indelible stamp that we, just see every time you hear the music, You think about that tattoo and the word Sublime and Bradley, sometimes, I feel like he's like, in some regards, a martyr for, even though it's like, you can say all kinds of things about his departure and, what he was doing in that, but he was suffering on a level that, and had the intelligence to express it to a way that we haven't really been communicated to by an artist in that respect very often. And it's just a very human cover, and like I said, it's kind of just an indelible mark to, the stamp of a journey of music that lasts forever.
Absolutely. I have to say this has been the most difficult episode for me by far. And I think it's a combination of the subject matter, obviously, surrounding the last album, which was so close to Brad's death, and talking with you because you were so close to it and have always been so close with my family and just someone that I really could relate to. But thank you very much for doing this, because I think a lot of people will appreciate hearing this. But I personally appreciate you being so, open and honest and willing to share with us. And it's difficult, I think, as you mentioned, like we don't have many opportunities to hear from someone who is so transparent about what they're going through. And then obviously we all see how it ends up. And I think that's a really challenging thing, but it also reminds us of our humanity, of Brad's humanity and our humanity and collectively just all of us, that we are so fragile and life is so fragile, and, things can get really crazy and fucked up no matter how great we think they are. And I think it's a great snapshot of life. So I appreciate you coming on and sharing all that with us.
Well, I appreciate that, Kelly. If I could affect you to that degree and, have a positive effect on just telling the stories and celebrating, Bradley's life, the music of Sublime. Like I said, all the people that were involved in the making of that record, Miguel, Paul Leary, David Kahn, Bud, Eric, Bradley, Marshall, a record label, Gasoline Alley. My Uncle Randy Phillips gave me a shot. A guy named Lawrence Safer in the company gave me a shot. I was just a kid, and it's like I said, and you guys were asked, it's surreal to think back on 25 years. It's like a blink of an eye that all this time has gone by so quickly, in a sense, when you look back on it. It's reminds me of, kind of just starting yesterday and the times when I, was in the trenches and first met Brad and Miguel and Bud and Eric, and some of those experiences, the studio, the trials, the tribulations. it's when we were all young, and it's kind of when we were still innocent and not jaded and just having fun. In some cases, for some people, maybe too much fun. It's in other cases, I mean, it's crazy because, again, like I said, I was 23 going through the process. Bradley was a couple years older than me. We were all in the kind of similar age group. It was guinea pig. It was our first experiences. We didn't have the life experience yet to draw from. You know what I mean? So there was an innocence about the time. There was a freedom about it, but there was also something that was. Like I said, it's bittersweet because, I just wish that you could turn that picture around and Bradley could smile back at you. You knew like we'd be getting more music and having those times with everybody, because it would have been so, amazing to see like where it went and what Bradley would be commenting on today, 25 years later when we're in our 50s. And I thought about the band in the context of the Grateful Dead, which survived till, Jerry Garcia was 50-something years old. 52, premature, but like Brad didn't get there. I always remember at one of the Enough Already benefit press conference things was like, well, Keith Richards is still alive, Jerry Garcia is still alive. You know what I mean? Like some people escape, the pitfalls and the demons and these things that are unfortunately take too many shining stars early, and Brad happened to be one of the brightest stars, brightest shooting stars that you could ever see, touch, feel, witness, and I'm just lucky that I got to be in his presence for the time I did. Lightning kind of struck. That doesn't always happen in your lifetime. It might only happen once in your lifetime. I mean, I said this before in the podcast every day I have to, in my heart, thank Brad Noel and Sublime as a whole, but just for me being where I'm at still, 25 years later. Most of the things would never have happened if it wasn't for Bradley Noel, and I wouldn't have met Brad Noel if it wasn't for Greg Abramson, so I have to give him props too, because, he made the initial introduction, and a lot of people worked very hard on this, kind of team that took Sublime at whatever cost. It wasn't like we were all sitting there making huge money or salary. We loved this music, we felt it affected us, and we were down to push it for whatever it took. And I mean, that's Bordeaux, Greg, Dave Zlackett, Zach Fischel, Josh Fischel, like I said, the Gasoline Alley people, even MCA people that took kind of a shot on it, and not knowing, the chain of events for it to really materialize and be there for us to cherish for, eternity is, that's the greatest gift. And, by God's grace, it happened. And glad that I could be a part of, that whole experience.
Yeah, and if you weren't a part of it, then we probably wouldn't have what we have right now. So we're also thankful that you were a part of it. And, I think something that you mentioned is something that I mention a lot of times is, we talk about that maybe they're having too much fun. And clearly that was certainly the case. But you said it, man, you guys were kids. These were 20-year-olds. I didn't know my asshole from my elbows when I was in my 20s, and to the kind of music that they were able to put out at that young of an age, and what you guys were able to accomplish. Like you said, you were just getting your beak wet with Sublime, and they were just learning the ropes. And realistically, the self-titled album was everybody's first run at this thing, and you guys knocked it out of the fucking park. And I just think that it's absolutely amazing. And here we are 25 years later, and just a few months ago, it probably still is right now, but I haven't checked. Just a few months ago, the album's still on Billboard's top 200 for this year. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing that it's held up so well after all of these years, and there really is no title or genre for it. It's good music is good music, and that's why it stands the test of time. And for what you've done and all of the people that you mentioned, it was a masterpiece, and it's great that we're here 25 years later and still talking about it, and it being so relevant and so big still to this day. I just think is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, complete testament to the soul and talent, and I think the immortalization of Bradley and the band.
Yeah, there's no question about it, and exactly what you said. Speaking about losing him, it's early. That's why we're doing this podcast, and that's why the Knoll Family Foundation is doing everything that they're doing to make sure that they can be there and help somebody in that situation. So once Bradley's house is able to get funded and up and running, be able to help some musicians dodge some of those landmines with some good staff and lots of experience coming from the foundation. So, again, that's the whole reason why we're doing this. And I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing these stories and giving us an opportunity to kind of pick your brain and hear about Self-Titled and help support the foundation that way and give all of the listeners just an awesome conversation to listen to.
Well, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure to do so, my honor, and rest in peace, Bradley Knoll. Thank you to him and Sublime, and the OPC.
Well, Kelly, this is the second time we've had Jon on, and I could have kept him for 5 hours each time. He's just an amazing guest every time.
He's a great person. I love talking with him. I'll never forget, I think it was over 10 years ago when I saw him at a show, and I hadn't seen him in a while, and it was like no time had passed, and we just sat there and talked for the longest time. He's got such great stories and so much fun to talk with, and he's so generous with his memories, and just really, really a lot of fun to talk to. And it was so cool of him to come back on for a second time.
Yeah, there's people out there that say like, "Oh God, I love Sublime," or "I love Brad," but like, man, Jon Phillips is one of the people that when you hear him talk about it, he means it.
Yeah, very genuine. And I've always known that he loved Sublime and loved my brother. And I even remember him at Brad's wedding. And so it's really great that we still have a connection and still have a relationship, and so awesome of him to support the foundation and be on the show.
It sure was. And guys, we hope that you enjoyed the conversation with Jon Phillips. The reason why we get a new episode of Bradley's House podcast out to you each and every week is not just to share these amazing stories and spread awareness, but obviously the Knoll Family Foundation is raising funds to get Bradley's house up and built, and you can be a part of it. You can visit the knollfamilyfoundation.org, or in the description of this show, you'll find a link tree. It'll give you all of the information that you need, all the different ways that you can take part and help have your little piece of this part of the story and get Bradley's house up and built. And make sure you are following the foundation's pages on whatever social media you prefer, because there's some exciting news that's going to be coming up soon for all of you Sublime fans. So find the Knoll Family Foundation on Facebook or Instagram. Go ahead and find them on Twitter as well. It's the Knoll Family Foundation everywhere. We also have Bradley's House Podcast on Twitter and the Bradley's House group on Facebook. Kelly, I know you get a little overwhelmed sometimes with the amazing support that comes through social media and the messages and the YouTube comments. And I know you and the family really appreciate all the support from the listeners.
We absolutely do. I wish there were 10 of me that could respond to things. Sometimes I feel bad that I don't get back to people, but it's just because I appreciate every single person that takes the time out of their day to comment on a post, or to like it, or to send a message, or to buy some of the merch. Like every little thing, I see all of that, and it just means so much. And it reminds me that we're not alone, and that we're all in this together. And it's such a tribute to Brad, and it really on the days that honestly that I'm having a hard time and, just super angry at him for not being here. It's really comforting to know that there's so many people that miss him and love him, and it really helps. And I'm not always good at expressing that. So I hope that people know how much that we appreciate them. And I try to always respond as quickly as possible, but I'm sure I drop the ball a lot too, because I've got so much going on. But it really, this kind of a project is not something that we can do alone. And so every single thing means so much. And the support has been incredible.
So guys, make sure that you are following the Knoll Family Foundation wherever you're listening to this show. Go ahead and hit that 5 stars. Hopefully we've earned it. If we haven't, hit the 5 stars anyway, guys. We're a nonprofit raising money for a charity here. Be nice. And go ahead and leave your comments. Like Kelly said, we see them all, and it's just great when you guys are doing that. Check out the KnollFamilyFoundation.org. You can pick up t-shirts, hats. If you guys aren't in a spot right now where, hey, I've already bought all the t-shirts and hats, just sharing the information to some of your friends on social media, sharing the show, that stuff goes a long way to help spread the word, because that is really important. So we appreciate everything that you guys have done. And Kelly, on today's episode, we spoke with Jon a little bit about the article that said the #1 song on Self-Titled was JailHouse. Now, we talked a little bit about that. I'm a huge music fan. I love all kinds of music. And in the history of music, of all of the music that has ever been made in the entire world, JailHouse is my #1 favorite song ever written and performed. #1 in the whole world. And there's a lot of weird other songs. It's not like all Sublime songs 1 through 10, like you guys would all like to think. But as far as music goes, JailHouse is my #1 all-time favorite song. So I thought it was cool that somebody else also appreciated that. Jon talked about how much he enjoyed it and told some stories about it. And to end everybody out, we are going to feature from the House That Bradley Built compilation album, available at law-records.com. This is JailHouse by Fortunate Youth.
And be sure to check out Fortunate Youth at Reggae Rise Up in Las Vegas, October 9th and 10th. And while you're there, please stop by the Knoll Family Foundation booth, because we'll be there and we're looking forward to seeing you.
So excited.
I won't give it up to you. I feel love, love. Oh, JailHouse gets empty, and Rudy gets a plenty. Oh, the battle stick is shorter. Oh, and Rudy gets taller. Can't fight against you. Oh no, 'cause we're strong in the rude people, yeah, oh no, yeah. Well, I was a youth in 1983. It was the best day of my life. Had the 89 vision. We didn't fuss or no fight. When all the little donuts wanna be my wife, felt the vision. It was playing on my guitar. I had to be there. When the rhythm, it was playing. Oh, I knew that I gotta be there, yeah. Oh, now Bradley is singing up there, yeah. Oh, love is baby hanging out here, yeah. Oh, the rhythm, it was singing versions, reggae versions. Told to the wise and uprooted, it's gonna be revealed unto babes and sublime. Can't fight against you, oh no, right now. In the rude people. oh, yeah. Can't fight against you, oh, no, right now. Yeah, rude people, oh, no. See, we gonna rule all this land among children. We're gonna rule this land. Oh yeah, 'cause real long, it was playing on my guitar. I had to be there, hard to be there. I had to be on the beat. I had to be there. Oh no. Said when I was a youth, it was the best day. It was the best day of my life. Had the alien vision. We didn't fuss or no fight. When all the little daughters wanna be my wife, well, the rhythm, it was playing on my guitar. I had to be there. I had to be there. Ooh, no. Oh, I had to be there. Oh, yeah. Ooh, the jailhouse gets empty, yeah. And Rudy gets on plenty, yeah. On the bottom shit gets shorter, no. And Jacob gets taller, oh. Can't fight against you, 'cause we're strong. And them rude people, no. I wanna let you know, I gotta let you know, no. Ooh. Can't fight against you.